That very huge and enormous pain in Oregon's side was noticeably less evident last season for Stanford. Of course, 8 wins, 5 losses, but if you look deeply into those games, they were this close to being a Pac-12 North candidate and a national factor as usual. We bring in Don King of Last Word on Sports to help us sort through this current Stanford football team as we're just 2 weeks away from it all getting back out onto the field. Don, thanks so much for joining us. We're almost there to kick off.
I cannot wait, Mark. I cannot wait. Thanks for having me.
And it's nice that Stanford doesn't have a layup out of the gate and we can actually watch a what could be a reasonably entertaining football game. But let's start at your quarterback position. Kevin Hogan's been there forever. I saw a stat where he completed 76% of his passes down the stretch against the likes of Cal, UCLA, and Maryland. A couple pretty good defenses there. So any hopes that I know the inconsistent label's been placed on him that he can finish off a little bit stronger than what he's shown us previously?
Yeah, that's really the headline to the 2015 Stanford season. If the Kevin Hogan from the last 3 games of 2014 plays all year this year, Stanford's going to have a really good season and potentially a great one. If the first 9 game or first 10 games of the season Kevin Hogan shows up, it's just going to be an interesting kind of roller coaster ride, because this season nobody can count on the defense being as great as it was last year or the year before. Might be, but there are enough question marks that the defense doesn't look like it's going to be able to carry the whole load like it has in recent times. So Hogan and the offense are going to have to step up. They're going to have to play better throughout each game all season long. They're going to have to be better in the red zone and on third down. And he showed, the guy that he had been the previous 2 seasons in leading the Cardinal to Pac-12 championships down the stretch last year. He just wasn't that guy earlier in the year for some personal reasons, and I think some offensive line maturity reasons, and perhaps some coaching and play calling reasons as well.
Yeah, so, led into that portion of the conversation, kind of dismissing what he's accomplished there at Stanford. So I certainly don't want to do that. It's been a great run for Kevin Hogan. He needs to clean up a little bit and become the guy in the pocket that he could possibly be. But again, if he continues on the road that he's been on, there is certainly nothing to be ashamed of there.
Yeah, I actually think he's gonna have to be better than he was those first 2 conference championship winning seasons, just because of the uncertainty with the defense and because the schedule is tremendous this year. And by that I mean good, and there are going to be lots of good games to watch and lots of stout opponents. But it's hard to project forward how everybody's going to do, but there are no out-of-conference cupcakes. And even though it's a very home favorable schedule for the Cardinal, the Pac-12 is no walk in the park, and both UCLA and USC should be good this year. Both are on the schedule. Notre Dame should be good. They're on the schedule, and at Northwestern, and then Central Florida at home. There just aren't any gimmies.
Yeah, we're not going to be confusing Stanford's schedule with Baylor's anytime soon. It's rugged top to bottom. There's no question about that.
Fair point.
Of course, we had a panel discussion, Don, Pac-12's best 5 at each position across the conference, and we talked running backs, and the stable across the conference is outstanding. Stanford might be the deepest. With 3 really talented backs. So can you look at the backfield, even though Christian McCaffrey seems to be the guy that's going to get the bulk of the carries, you're in good shape there?
No question. I think McCaffrey's going to be the guy. I don't know if he'll be a bell cow like a Toby Gerhardt or a Stephon Taylor were in their heyday. I don't think he's going to be getting 30 carries a game at any point this year. But he's going to get 15 to 20 touches, I think, at a minimum. Barry J. Sanders is going to factor prominently, particularly on third downs and kind of as a change-up back. I think you're going to see him out of the backfield a lot. I think you're still going to see Ramon Wright a lot in short yardage situations, particularly. He had a fantastic finish to the season last year. He scored 9 touchdowns in those last 3 games we talked about earlier. So he is decidedly going to be a factor in the running game. And then there's some youngsters that you might see. I heard in the scrimmage or the open practice yesterday, Bryce Love, a true freshman, out of Charlotte, North Carolina, ripped off a 77-yarder. So that kid apparently can fly. The one particular or potential void is in the big back category, and there are a couple of big bodies who are coming in, but they're still young. Cameron Scarlett is a true freshman. He's coming off an ACL, so it's not clear that he'll play this year. Given that that injury, and want to make sure that he's right physically before pressing him into action. But he's got that kind of big body and could assume that mantle, if not this year, then certainly next year and into the future.
And so for the first time since 2007, you didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher, but at the same time, that might extend to this season, but the running game might be in tremendous shape. Just obviously that yardage and production is going to be spread out amongst three backs.
Yep.
Let's talk offensive line, Don. You lose the complete stud off to the NFL, Andrus Peat, but you got the other four returning starters in place.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the offensive line at all. And candidly, I think that has a lot to do with the underperformance of the offense last year, particularly earlier in the year. In 2014, there were four new starters up front, immensely talented, but still four new starters. It's a lot. This year, Pete rotates out off to the Saints in the NFL. But everybody else is back, and a lot of guys are back who have had significant playing time together. So, the left side is all set. Left tackle, you're going to see Kyle Murphy flip over from the right to take Pete's old spot. Graham Schuler will start at center. Joshua Garnett, who was really solid at left guard, returns this year to take that same role. And the battles will be on the right side now for guard and tackle, and there are about 9 guys who are vying for those spots, including Nick Davidson and David Bright. Bright is coming off an injury. I hear he's better now and back in camp and at 100%. So those two are going to fight it out for those two positions on the right side, and frankly, there's a good chance that each of them will occupy the right guard and right tackle positions and play together. So there's some movement and some competition going, but there's competition going amongst highly talented folks, and 3 of the 5 starters from last year are already locked in on the left side, and I think the left side of the line, and most importantly, Hogan's blind side, are going to be incredibly well taken care of.
Don, I'll make a bit of an assumption that if a Stanford tight end's getting significant playing time, that he can block. So we'll focus on the passing aspect of the tight ends. We'll group them with the wide receivers. Devon Cajuste would be the leader in that category from the wideout position. You got Austin Hooper. Fill us in on the other guys that we need to get familiar with.
Yeah, Hooper is terrific. No question about that. He's going to play a huge role at tight end. And candidly, we did one of the Pac-12 previews, and I've got him as the best tight end in the entire Pac-12, and I think that's going to play out, and I think that's going to be the case. Another name whom you haven't seen much, there are a couple other guys who got some significant playing time last year. One who didn't was Dalton Schultz as a true freshman. Apparently, he's going to be the number 2 pass-catching tight end this season. He was a very highly touted recruit, took a red shirt last year. He looks like he's going to be the second option in the receiving tight end package this season. He's got all the physical tools. He's about 6'6". He's 230 to 235 pounds. Reminds a lot of people of a Zach Ertz. Expect him to have a huge season this year as a sophomore and getting his first real playing time. And then there are the other guys who did get some time last year and performed well. Guys like Greg Tabwada. That's a name to keep in mind. Another good player. Eric Cotton is another guy who's he goes about 6'6". He's about 250. So he does a lot of he'll handle a lot of the road grading help on the outside and downfield. But he's got a decent set of hands as well. So look for the tight end position to rebound. And apparently Hogan has said at some point, talking to the media during camp, that you could see 4 Stanford tight ends on the field at one time. And those of us who have loved the identity that the Cardinal has forged over the last several years, starting with the Harbaugh era in 2007, we would welcome that. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, if there's one game that really sticks out to me in terms of Stanford football, and establishing dominance and then maintaining the dominance along with Oregon in the Pac-12 North is not necessarily the most exciting games against Oregon, the overtime game, some of those, but the one 2 years ago where you just bludgeoned them. They made a last gasp effort at a comeback, but it was just the line splits were that much, and it was just a clinic in old school football up front.
That's exactly right. And you know, the Stanford faithful would welcome a return to that all season long. We would love to see that, particularly starting week 3 at the Coliseum in LA. That would be great.
Hey, Don, let's look at the defense, because from a national perspective, a lot of people look at record, then they look at what's usually the bell cow for this team, and it's front 7 on defense. That's what I think of when I think about the Stanford emergence under Harbaugh, then Shaw. It's number 1, front 7 on defense has been amazing.
Yep.
Well, last season, despite the 5 losses, USC scored 13 points.
Right.
Part of that was a gift from the Stanford offense. You shut down Brett Hundley to 10 points. Maryland could do nothing in the bowl game, on and on and on. The defense was not only number 1 ranked, as you well know, in the total defense in the Pac-12, but it was over 100 yards better than number 2 ranked Utah. You do have some issues up front in the defensive line, so maybe we start there.
Yeah, let's. I will tell you, and this is good news for Cardinal fans everywhere. The defensive line looked to be like the biggest question mark coming into 2015. I don't know that that's any longer the case. I think the defensive line now is shaped up through camp, if all the reports I'm hearing from ESPN's David Lombardi and other sources are accurate. It looks like the D-line is shaping up to be solid yet again. You know, may not be the strength of the defense, but I certainly don't think people feel like it's going to be a weakness at this point. And there was some concern about that, you know, in spring ball when there were no healthy bodies around. You know, the health seems to have come back. Aziz Shatu seems to have really taken a step forward as a leader and as a high motor performer on the defense in the trenches throughout camp. Solomon Thomas, who redshirted last year, had a great spring game, but he was one of the 3 healthy bodies throughout spring camp. He's bulked up a lot, seems to be playing really, really well. Harrison Phillips, who had his red shirt pulled last year and was pressed into action because of some injuries along the defensive front, also has played very well by all accounts throughout camp. And lastly, Stanford's first ever graduate transfer, Brennan Scarlett, who comes over from Cal of all places to join his freshman running back brother Cameron, has apparently integrated himself incredibly well and played well throughout fall camp so far as well. So those 4 figure to be kind of the stalwarts across the defensive front. Luke Kamatule is back at defensive end after transferring, might play a little outside linebacker. Either way, I think you can expect him to factor into the upfront rush scheme a little bit as well and use that 6'8" height to be a little bit disruptive. So the D-line actually looks solid. There are going to be a few more bodies that will rotate in, but those 4 guys I mentioned first are kind of going to be the stalwarts and the you know, kind of the staples that you're going to see out there on the defensive side of the ball.
And if there's any guy that really needs to produce when he steps on campus, it's the guy that transfers from the arch rival.
No question.
No forgiveness there. Got to produce for us.
Yeah, and he better show up and play real hard against Cal. So.
Linebacker. So you feel good about the defensive front, even though some issues in the spring and with health and so forth. No questions with the linebackers, unless I'm missing something with Kevin Anderson on the outside, Blake Martinez, and other very experienced players.
Absolutely. The linebacking core is the one area I don't think there were any real questions about. And, you know, clearly there have been some great players rotate through and some good guys who have moved on to play on Sundays. From, you know, the linebacking core, which has kind of been the strength of the defense for a while now, going back to the Shane Scove days early in the Harbaugh tenure. But I think the defense is relatively loaded there. So the question was, can the guys up front hold their own to keep the linebackers free to do what they do? A lot of people, I think, miss this fact. But Blake Martinez was actually Stanford's leading tackler last year and one of the leading tacklers in the entire conference. And he's back. And, manning the inside and taking a leadership role. And he's really going to kind of be the captain of the defense. And he's going to be one of the best players at linebacker that the Cardinal has seen in a while. And frankly, he should compete for some all-conference consideration by the time it's all over. The guy's a tackling machine. Some other guys we haven't talked about, Peter Kalambayi. I saw one of those Pac-12 networks replays of the Washington game last year, and that kid was just all over the field. And if memory serves, he was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Week after that game. He's back. He's going to play a lot. I understand Nor Davis is hurt, so that's a bit of a disappointment. It looks like he is going to miss some time, but there's some other guys like Perez and Palma that figure to step in and take those reps at the inside linebacker position and seem to be having really good camps and look poised to play really well as well. So not a ton of concern about the linebacking core at all.
Yeah, Don, we've had conversations about the secondary being very underrated, very productive, very sound, and because the front seven's been star-studded and kind of led this surge of elite status in the Pac-12, the secondary's gotten overlooked. Well,
yep.
Jordan Richards gone to the NFL. Alex Carter gone to the NFL. Wayne Lyons goes to Michigan. I don't know what the story is there. And then Zach Hoffmeyer is a Major League Baseball draft casualty.
Yep.
So that's a big hole in the secondary.
Yes, that is the question mark now. With the defensive line looking short up, the secondary now becomes the area to focus on and the area to worry about. Now, that said, there is talent back there. Ronnie Harris comes back. He'll lock down one of the corners. He's a good player, good solid player. Started all last season opposite Alex Carter. Don't know that his contributions were really fully well appreciated, because nobody was throwing at Carter. So Harris got a lot of action and he handled himself really, really well. And that's one of the reasons the defense was rated so highly. So Harris is back. He's healthy. That's going to be key. So the question really boils down to more than anything to the other cornerback spot. It looks like a couple of offensive converts are going to man the two safety spots. So former quarterback Dallas Lloyd figures to start at one safety, and at the other, Cody Whitfield, he of that spectacular one-handed backhand catch against UCLA a couple of seasons ago, figures to man the other safety position. Those two apparently are way far ahead of all the others from both an athleticism and a communication standpoint on the very back end of the defense. I will put a plug in for a couple of other guys that are worth keeping an eye out at the safety position. Denzel Franklin is a big hitter, so keep an eye out for him. I think he's going to have some impact and will make a difference on the back end. So he's certainly one to consider. And the other, there's another safety. I'm blanking on his name right now that we're going to want to keep an eye on. Somebody who's highly touted, Brandon Simmons, who was a redshirt last year. So this is his second year on the farm, first year playing. I think you're going to see him get some playing time as well. He and Franklin kind of as the key backups to Lloyd and Whitfield. So now the corners, that's really where the question comes down to. So here's the good news. There's a ton of talent. Stanford's recruited the defensive secondary incredibly well the last few years. And after bringing in Dwayne Aquina from Texas, his reputation precedes him with regard to getting guys developed and sending them to the NFL during his time there. Stanford may be called DBU before too many more years if that kind of talent continues to flow into the organization. So the other corner is really the key question, and there are several guys who are kind of contending for playing time there. Apparently Elijah Holder and Alameen Murphy came into fall camp as kind of the leaders to take over the nickel spot and also that alternate corner on the other side of Ronnie Harris. But Terrence Alexander, who did get some playing time last year as a true freshman, and Tywan Thomas, who showed well in the spring and who's playing really well apparently in the fall camp, are also pushing their way into the mix for playing time. And I think you can expect to see all of those guys play. And it'll be interesting to see how they're mixed and matched and who plays in the slot and who takes the other corner. Apparently Stanford played something like 70% of its snaps in Pac-12 play last year in the nickel formation. They're just, you're playing Washington State and Oregon State and Cal and people who sling it all over the field. So there's a lot of use for the nickel package, and frankly, that fifth defensive back, or sometimes the sixth one in the dime package, can be every bit as important as the starter on one side or the other. So it looks good from a talent standpoint. These guys just aren't terribly experienced. That's the concern. We got to see them get out there in game conditions, and we got to see them play.
You lose the place kicker and the punter, and we joked about it at the spring game.
That was brutal.
How bad that situation looked.
Woo! It was brutal. Apparently, Conrad Ucrapina, though, is having a much better fall camp and has been very reliable, particularly on the shorter kicks. He appears to be getting it done, which is great news, because it's just, that's one of those things you can't do without. You want to not pay a ton of attention to special teams until it lets you down. And when it lets you down, it's just all ugly. You can lose some football games that way. So true freshman Jake Bailey, who's a scholarship athlete, played some cornerback apparently in high school, so he's a good athlete. Apparently he's just been killing it in the punting game throughout fall camp. He looks to have the inside track on taking over the punting spot, but he's got a big leg, and he also looks to be a kickoff specialist and potentially a specialist on long-range field goals as well. So expect him to come in and make a difference, even as a true freshman. I think the plan is to try to preserve his leg, not use him up. He's kind of going to be the heir apparent for the long term from a field goal kicking position, our specialist. But it looks like he'll handle punting duties this year, kickoff duties, and perhaps some attempts at very long range field goals, because he's got a much bigger leg than Ucrapina has.
Don, you alluded to the schedule. I want to highlight this for some people that don't recognize, whether they're just strictly Stanford fans or Pac-12 fans and don't see the national picture, or for whatever reason just don't make the comparisons of schedules. So you look at Notre Dame, Northwestern, Central Florida out of conference, and you think, they're playing one team in Notre Dame and discount Northwestern. Okay, I am carving through every schedule in America.
Yep.
Every team in the SEC outside of South Carolina plays one maybe difficult Power 5 conference team, and then the other three are layups.
Yep.
There are schools like we mentioned, Baylor, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, schools like that, North Carolina State that was a bowl team last year in the ACC that play nobody. I mean, It's all Sun Belt teams. It's all Conference USA. Nobody. Stanford plays Notre Dame, preseason top 10 team. I know Northwestern gets discounted coming off of 5-7, but they beat Notre Dame last year. Northwestern's going to be pretty good this year. They should win 7
and they beat Wisconsin
games
last year too. So Notre Dame is not a walkover. Northwestern is not a walkover.
No, they're not.
At all.
They're a tough football team. They're well coached. Central Florida, of course, won the BCS game 2 years ago, beat Louisville en route to doing so, were formidable last year. And even though they're not a Power 5, that's about as good a non-Power 5 as you can get. That's a loaded non-conference schedule. I'm only going to say Virginia's is tougher because they've got Notre Dame, Boise State, and UCLA, and you get UCLA anyway. So that is about as difficult as it gets. And then on top of that, you play just about everybody in the conference. Again, I credit the Pac-12 for playing 9 conference games. So you play 9 of the other 11 participants, and you miss this year 2 pretty good football teams. But basically, you're going to miss almost 2 pretty good football teams, regardless of what the in-conference schedule is. So you've got everybody excluding Arizona State and Utah.
That's right. Yeah, the schedule this year is loaded. And you know who that's good for? It's good for Stanford football fans, because the home slate this year does feature 7 of those very good teams, including Notre Dame and Oregon and UCLA this season. Central Florida comes to the farm this year as well. So it's really a really good slate of home games, but if anybody believes that Stanford can win all of those home games, I think that's probably a bit optimistic. There are just great football teams coming in. Oregon now has two good options at quarterback since Vernon Adams finally passed that math test and graduated from Eastern Washington. So the Ducks are going to be formidable. UCLA, again, figures to be good. By the time Stanford plays them fairly late in the year, it looks like Rosen's going to get the nod at quarterback, despite Moore lighting him up in practice last week. He will have worked through some of his rookie jitters by then. UCLA is going to be a really good football team. And as you mentioned, Notre Dame is preseason top 10. They figure to factor into the college football playoff picture. And Stanford closes the season with them. Yeah, it's at home, but Malik Zaire managed to send another very experienced quarterback packing in Everett Golson. Kid must be pretty good. And we know Notre Dame is solid across both lines of scrimmage, which is how you win football games in college football. So the schedule is loaded. And I think Stanford has a very solid team this year. I think this team is going to resemble the 2012 and 2013 editions of Stanford football more than the 2014 edition. However, the schedule is just brutal. There is no UC Davis this year. You struggle to say there's an easy win on the schedule. Maybe Colorado, on the road at Boulder, but anything can happen late in the season in conference in a very tough Pac-12. And I think the Buffaloes are even headed in the right direction. And you get a good Arizona team at home. It's just there aren't any gimmies. So any kind of emotional letdown or layup, and the team is going to get caught. And I think, based on the preseason polls, Stanford's already sitting behind USC and Oregon and Notre Dame, and I think deservedly so. I expect each of those teams to be better. So let's assume the Card knocks off one of those three. There's a decent chance that Stanford gets tripped up by somebody else that we're not talking about right at the moment. And I think this will have been a pretty successful season if Stanford finishes 9-3 and second in the Pac-12 North, and gets to one of the top tier Pac-12 bowl games. Like a Holiday or an Alamo or something like that. I think that's how this is going to go.
So Don, I believe I saw where the Last Word on Sports crew got together for Pac-12 predictions. Otherwise, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but have you made any kind of official Pac-12 predictions?
Yeah, I'll tell you how I voted in that. I had Oregon winning the North. I had Stanford second. I had USC winning the South, which was somewhat surprising. I personally was surprised that it was as unanimous as it was. I think Arizona State will have something to say about that in the Southern Division. I think there's a shot that they could indeed take the South again this year. So we'll see what happens with that. But I've got Oregon winning the Pac-12 title right now over USC in the championship game. That's how I had it shaken out.
Don King from Last Word on Sports joining us to break down Stanford football. Please check out his work on Last Word on Sports and a number of other writers. We talk about Mike Laval. Always, sometime I want to have both of you on at the same time, because I think we need to hash out some college football playoff.
We would love that.
Formatting discussion and how we would love to see this thing set up, because I think we both have pretty good angles on things.
Yeah, I would love to do that. So pencil me in. Yeah, Mike is fantastic. One of the very best writers we've got. So, and he has some interesting thoughts about how this thing should go down the road into the future. I'd love to have that discussion.
Definitely. All right, Don, thanks for the breakdown.
Thank you, Mark, as always. Have a great day.